Hello everyone and welcome to another video here on the channel. Today we're gonna have a very fast-paced video because I'm gonna be showing you all of the generators that we have in Substance Painter and the usual cases that we might be needing them for. Now before we go there, don't forget to subscribe, it really helps the channel. And with that said, let's go. The first thing you guys need to understand is that in order for generators to work, you need to bake. You're not gonna get away from baking. You need to bake. You of course need to have proper UVs because otherwise the mesh maps that we generate are not gonna be doing their work. So just a quick overview here on bakes. We have plenty of videos here on the channel about baking. Make sure to look them up if you have a couple of questions here. So, and of course you can ask questions here in the comments, but I'm just gonna go for a traditional bake right here, 4K in this case. I'm gonna set this to 16x on the super sampling. There we go, and just bake selected textures. So that's pretty much it. Now, as you can see here on the maps that we're baking, we have all of the maps available to us. ID map, ambient occlusion map, curvature map, thickness map, and it's important that we bake all of these maps because again, they will be used for the generators. Now, I want to cover some utility generators first, and then we're going to go and talk about the main generators that we're going to be using for masking. I'm going to start with a fill layer right here. I'm going to right click and I'm going to add a generator. Normally when we do this, things break. The reason why this break is, again, some of these generators are meant to be utility generators and some of the generators are meant to be more masking generators. Why are they in the same section? Not sure. Anyway, the first one is UV checker. So this one's a great generator just to check how the distortion is going on your UVs. You should have already done this inside of Blender or Maya when you were doing your UVs, but if you didn't and you want to make sure that everything is baking properly, then this generator right here is a really good way to see all of your seam lines and of course the texel resolution of your element, making sure that all of the numbers in this case are really close to each other. Now, talking about texel density, that's another generator that we have right here. This one, UV texel density, which should tell you how your UV texel density is working. As you can see, for instance, this inner side of the eyes doesn't have as much texel density as some of the other elements. Again, it might look a little bit weird right here. Don't worry too much about the colors. The most important thing is you want to make sure that the general tone is towards the greens or the blues, which means that you have a high texel density for your element. And then there's this other one right here. This is called a Grayscale converter. I'm going to explain what this is a little bit later in the video because it's a little bit more technical, but it's a really cool one. So let's talk about the main generators. And to do this, let's of course add some sort of like a basic construction here. I'm just going to add a basic bone element right there, and let's add a metal effect as well. This is not a texturing tutorial. We're going to cover that in another time. But now, let's say we want to add a rust generator, right? Very typical rust generator. Well, a lot of people, when they add rust or any type of grime or dirt, they just go to the dirt generator. And even though it's a good generator, there's a bunch of other ones that I want to explain right now. First, we of course need to add a black mask in this case, and I'm going to add the generator, and we have all of these generators available to us. Let's start with the first one, 3D distance. This one's really, really interesting. Imagine, for instance, that we have something that happened near this element. Maybe, I don't know, someone died, or we have an explosion or something. Well, you can position this particular element. Imagine like an invisible circle or an invisible sphere that's moving in the 3D space, and you can position this particular element wherever you want on the specific position of the object. So for instance, again, imagine there's going to be like a blast or something on this side. We can use position X, we can use position Y, we can use position Z to move this circle around. And then we have the radius to control how much or how little of that detail we get right here. Contrast as well. So if you want to position a specific element that has or is a certain amount of distance away from your object, this generator is really good to place that in 3D space. The next generator that we can use is this one. It's a very simple one. It's called the linear gradient, and it's just literally a linear gradient from top to bottom. But we can also change the position, and this is where things get interesting. Can you see these colors right here, this purple and this green? These represent the colors that we normally have on our objects. So this violet color, for instance, right now represents the top part of our element, and this green color represents the bottom part. If we change these colors, if we change the hue of these colors, the direction of our element is going to change based on the position map that we have right here. So remember the mesh maps that I mentioned that were so important? Well, we're using those values, those colors, to tell this specific gradient how we're going to be modifying. Most of the generators will have an invert option that you can use to change the specific position of these elements. So the strong thing about the linear gradient is the fact that you can control this linear position again by changing the hue. So we can have a linear gradient coming from left to right, from top to bottom, from front to back, and that's not the same thing that we can do for the next generator. The next generator is this one right here. I'm going to move ahead a little bit, which is the position generator. A lot of people might be confusing the previous one with this one, the position generator. But the position, as you can see right here, will more often than not use the top to bottom distribution. So as you can see, we're going to have this gradient going from the top of the element to the bottom part of the element. We can, of course, use blur and all of the different elements that we have on our generators to get a nicer effect. But this one, we usually go again from top to bottom. It is possible, if we go here to position gradient, to change this right here. You can see that right now it's set to top to bottom. If we change that and we go, no, we want this actually to be from right to left, or from left to right, or from front to back, you can do the same thing. Technically, it's very similar to the one that we just saw, the linear gradient. The main difference is that on the other one, you have a little bit more freedom again to sort of like move in this sort of like 3D space by changing the colors on the values. Next generator, Ambient Occlusion generator. This is very, very handy. We use it all the time. And what this is doing, it's pretty much sampling the Ambient Occlusion map. We could also use the Ambient Occlusion map as a fill layer, for instance. But this one's really good because we can change the global invert, and without having to add any sort of like levels or anything, we can just start controlling how much or how little we want this element to be affecting us. So once we modify this, and again, if you want to play with a different invert on the Ambient Occlusion, this generator is really, really good. Now, this next generator is really interesting. It's relatively new. It's called the Autostitching. It doesn't really work with this one in particular, right? Because, well, it doesn't make that much sense, to be honest. But if you're doing garments, if you're bringing elements from, for instance, Marvelous Designer, and the UV islands of your patterns are really, really clean, this is a very easy way to add stitching to them, because as you can see, it follows the UV islands. There's a little bit of an offset. You can see right there. We can push this in so that it's a little bit closer to the seam line, but there's a little bit of an offset from the original seam line, which should be going roughly around that point right there. So this one, again, very case specific, but a good tool to have. Next one, curvature. Oh, this is such a good one right here. The curvature map, remember, captures the convex areas and the concave areas of your element, right? Sort of like the hills and the valleys of your area. So in this case, as what we're saying, all of the hills, right, like the high points of our element are getting marked with this particular element. It's not the exact same thing as the metal edgeware. A lot of people might think it's the exact same thing. As you can see, this is a lot softer. We can, of course, control that with a little bit of contrast, but it will hit more of the areas. So it's a good way to break up the elements or break up the materials on your object. You can, of course, flip that around, and instead of focusing on the hills, we're going to be focusing on the valleys, right, like the concave areas of the element. And again, we can play with all of these elements to generate more or less of the effect. Curvature generator, very underrated. Now, this is very overrated, the dirt generator. Everyone and their grandmas like to use the dirt generator to add a little bit more detail to your objects. That's fine, guys. It's fine. I love using it. It's really good. I'm just going to explain two things that a lot of people seem to forget about this one. First, it by default has this grunge effect, and the grunge effect will affect everything uniformly. You can see how everything gets a little bit dirty across this skull. So if we decrease the grunge amount, we're going to get a little bit of a cleaner effect, similar or closer to what we might expect to see on the Ambient Occlusion. Again, quite nice, I would say. But yeah, feel free to play with this one. I do recommend turning on triplanar projection, especially if you want to avoid having some weird seams on your element, and especially if you're going to be using the grunge amount. Now, as I always mentioned, when you're using dirt generator and pretty much any other generator, you don't want the machine, or in this case the software, to do all the work for you. It's ideally you want to be able to have a little bit more control over the whole thing, and to do that, it's important to always break up these things a little bit. Otherwise, it looks too obvious. Like we have dirt and a very sort of like balanced or uniform level of dirt in every single space of the skull. Doesn't make sense. So I usually like to add, this is my little sort of like secret. It's not a secret, but I'm going to add a fill layer right here, and on the fill layers we can add a clouds modifier, for instance, increase the contrast of the clouds, play a little bit with the balance, play even a little bit with the tiling so we have more clouds, and then if you multiply that against the underlying generator, which in this case is the dirt generator, we're pretty much using the clouds generator to erase a little bit of the dirt from the underlying layer. So as you can see right here, instead of having a very obvious sort of like dirt effect going across the whole thing, we break it down a little bit. So it's a good way. I like using this. I also like going in and manually painting in or out different elements of our object, but just keep it in mind whenever you're using generators, if you don't want things to look too CG, too obvious because you're using Substance Painter, try to break it up with more elements. Now, there's a couple, the next generators that I'm going to mention, and it's going to be really quickly. It's going to be the Dripping Rust, the Fiberglass, and there's another one down here, which is the Shrink Wrap or the Inflate Shrink Wrap. There we go. So this one's right here, they work fine. Like for instance, this Dripping Rust, it gives you a good result. We get a little bit of dripping. You can even increase the drip intensity, and you can see how we're going to get more of that sort of like effect going down. It will use again the position map to know what side or what part of your object is down, so it's important to always have those maps. It's good. This one I do like, especially when using it with Rust, but I don't see myself using this often with other elements or other layers. Like if I'm adding some blood or some like color variation, I don't normally use this kind of information. Now the other two, I'm actually going to have to create a new layer right here. And let's make this like a dark layer so it's a little bit easier to see, because they will add a sort of like detail, a normal map detail that gives us the impression of different types of materials. So this one's also similar to the UV and the textile one that we saw at the beginning. This one's will work a little bit more with the full material, so not a mask. And in this case, the first one is the fiberglass material. As you can see, it gives us this sort of like fiberglassy look to the whole thing. Pretty interesting, but normally I would just grab a fiberglass material from the library instead, but it's a good option to have. And then this one, which to be honest, I've never ever used, but it's called the shrink wrap or inflate shrink wrap, which gives us this sort of like effect as if there were wrinkles going around the whole thing. Like if our object has been sort of like airtight sealed with like plastic or something like that. Again, I don't think I've ever used this one in particular, but one place that I've seen people use this one is they use that specific element and then they create like a little tape or something. And since you get some wrinkles, it works. It can work. Not my favorite generator, to be honest. Not something that I use very often, but if you want to play around with it, that's fine. There's even some like other tools over here that you can use that gives us a similar result. And that's one thing I want to say quickly about softwares in general, guys. There's a lot of tools that never get deleted or replaced, and they're just old tools that have been replaced with newer elements. For instance, we now have the brushes that we can draw here on top of the model, the path brushes that could substitute the stitching that we showed a little bit earlier. So that's why it's so important to explore, to learn, to watch all of these tutorials, and make sure that we get all of the information to have more tools available to us as artists. Next generator, and this one is one of my favorite generators, which is the light generator. Oh, this light generator, I use it so much. If you recently saw the new course, the hand-painted course, we use this quite a bit to build up some of the values that we have on our character and on our props to generate the other colors that we're going to be needing. So this generator right here, really freaking good. I like it. This is pretty much a lamp that is shining light to our object, and where the light is hitting the object, that's where we get the mask. So for instance here, let me increase the highlight level so you can see it. There we go. Right now, since both of these little knobs are pointing up, that means that the light is coming from that direction. It's from whatever this little point is towards the center. That's the direction of the light. So I use this all the time. For instance, if I want to add a little bit of dirt on the bottom part of the character, I can do this, and look at that. All of the faces that are facing down or that have a downward trend in this case will be affected by this particular element. Really good generator. I use it all the time, the light one. Now, this next generator is the one that I mentioned that I was going to show a little bit later, which is this, the Grayscale conversion, okay? Now, this one's interesting because what this does is it takes a color map and it transforms the color information into a black and white information. And this can be used for masking. Let me show you how it works. So I'm going to click on this thing right here. And the first thing that you're going to notice is no matter how much I move this thing, nothing is happening. Even if I click on Alt and click right here, there's absolutely nothing. It's completely black because the source over here, as you can see, is using this uniform color to bring that information. So this map, this generator in particular, needs an extra image to work properly. And one of the images that we can use, and it's actually really good, it's the ID map. So if we go for the color map ID, right now, as you can see, it's grabbing all of the colors, and since all of the colors have the same value, we're getting this sort of like gray mask right there. If we go back to material, we're gonna see a very soft, faint effect there on the element. But here's the fun part. If you take a look at the map, we have red, green, and blue, right? Which are the normal pixel colors that we have in our screens. Well, this map, we can go to the Grayscale type and say, hey, I just want you to sample the red channel from your image. And look at this. It grabs the red information and converts it into a mask. So it changes the red value here on my ID map, and it changes it so that only the teeth now have the rust. And I can say, oh, no, I just want the green channel. Boom, there we go. Now I just want the blue channel. There we go. We can adjust the balance. We can adjust the contrast a little bit, especially if the tones are not as solid as what I have on my ID map. But it's very cool. It's a good map, to be honest. Now, if you don't want to use this map, we can use another one. We can, for instance, use the Ambient Occlusion map. So if we use the Ambient Occlusion map, what we're doing is pretty much converting this little generator into an Ambient Occlusion generator, because it's taking that map and then we're using it to modify how we apply these things. But the cool thing is you could grab any other map. So for instance, we could grab, I don't know, this mesh map right here. And as you can see, we have this mesh thing right there. We're gonna tile it or whatever, and if we start playing with the valence, we're gonna start seeing that specific effect. So theoretically, you can grab any image out there and grab information from that object and use all of these grayscale types to convert the color information into a black and white information that can then be used as a mask. I know it might not seem like much, but hopefully you remember this one. If later down the line there's a specific combination that you need to do and you remember, oh, this map, I can use it to convert this specific color information. Again, very niche use, I would say, but quite important. Now we have two more generators here, and this is the sort of like a complete toolbox generator, I like to call it, which is the Mask Builder Legacy and the Mask Editor. They're both very similar. The Mask Builder Legacy, as the name implies, has been replaced or upgraded with this Mask Editor right here. And the way this Mask Editor works is it gives you access to a bunch of different things. So for instance, right now we're using curvature opacity to generate a curvature opacity map, but at the same time we could use a world space opacity map to generate a different kind of effect right there, or we can use a position gradient overlay right there to get an overlay coming from the top. So as you can see, it sort of like mix and matches all of the different elements: world space, normal, gradient, thickness, curvature, and you can utilize these things. You can even input some textures right there to generate more specific or more unique masks that you're going to be building. They are like a hybrid combination of all of the mask and generators that we've seen before. This, I wouldn't say they're like super advanced or anything, but more often than not, I would say that all of the other generators can get the job done easily. And now we get to one of our favorite ones, right? Metal Edgeware. Everyone loves Metal Edgeware. But now you can see the difference between Metal Edgeware and curvature. Remember that curvature was a lot broader, it was a little bit bigger, so we had a little bit more rust going across the different areas of our element. Well, this is the big difference that we're gonna see with this one in particular. This one in particular is a lot sharper. It's gonna go to very specific points and to the very hard edges of our element. It's really good. I use it all the time, but again, make sure to use something like a clouds generator or like a dirt, or just go in and paint, because normally, and you can look around your room or your office, you're not gonna see an object that's completely damaged in every single border and corner. You're usually going to see a little bit of a break points in certain areas. So if you're going to be using Metal Edgeware, make sure to tweak it a little bit. Don't just let it sit like this. The position generator, very good. We've already talked a little bit about it. It's depending on where you are, top, bottom, front, back, left, right, and you can change that right here with the position gradient. This is especially useful. For instance, let's imagine that there's a huge skull, right? Like living on the desert or something. Well, if we want sand to be hitting from below, we're going to be using the position generator to get a little bit of sand or grunge or mud or something like that. Now, a very important point, when you are preparing your object, for instance, here inside of Maya, it is quite useful to make sure that the object is above the ground. If for any reason your object is below the ground, you might get a very sharp dark line at that specific distance, because the position generator doesn't really bake down that information properly onto the object. So ideally, and most of the time when we're doing vehicles, weapons, or everything, it's always above the ground so that we have that specific access. If you're doing a building, make sure all of the elements from the building are exactly where they need to be in order for this generator to work in the best possible way. Now, this one in particular is, again, very niche but really good. It's the UV border. This one will mask the UV border of your object. So if you have some specific shells that you want to use, or you want to add some sort of like, I don't know, a specific ambient occlusion or damage, this one is really good. I quite like this one, and it's also a good way to check for your UV borders, because it's a good way to mask them, right? Like more often than not, we're trying to hide all of those UV seams. So this mask in particular, it's a very good way to go exactly where the UV seam is and use, for instance, something like this along with like a dirt generator or something like that to really hide that UV seam. So the UV border distance, another good generator here inside of Substance. For the last generator here in this small video, my friends, we're gonna go with the world space normals, and this one is also another one of my favorites. The world space normals will sample the direction that each face is facing. This is really good if you want to add like a nice top layer of dust on top of everything, or maybe you're doing like a snowy environment and the props need to have a little bit of a cover there with snow. Well, this one will tell you all the faces that are facing up, or of course, if we invert this, all of the faces that are facing down. It's a little bit different than the light one, because light will just like flood everything on top of it, so there might be some faces facing in slightly different directions, and you will not get the effect with this one right here. Okay, so in this one right here, it's literally all of the faces that are facing up, all of the faces that are facing down, and you can change that with this one, world space normal. Over here, you can change the direction, right to left, top to bottom, front to back, and of course change the contrast depending on how intense or not you want this effect to be. Really good, this one, for adding that like top layer of dust, top layer of grunge, or like maybe some moisture or some rust and metal elements coming from the bottom. Like very specific, similar to the light, but not exactly the same. So that's it, my friends. As you can see, the generators are relatively simple to use. The one thing I want you to remember is you are going to need the information from the mesh maps. If you don't have the mesh maps, the generators are not going to work properly. Some generators work on the main channel and some generators work on masks. That's another important distinction that I want you guys to keep in mind. And finally, make sure to add variation to your generators. It's important. Otherwise, you're going to just look very obvious. It's going to be very obvious when you're using the dirt or the metal edgeware or the ambient occlusion. Break them down, combine multiple masks. We have videos here on the channel in case you want to check those out. Make sure to really build up that layering effect on your textures. Now, of course, if you want to learn more about Substance Painter, we have a full course available. We do a very cool dwarf, Door the Dwarf, and in that we also go over all of these generators and all of the important information that you might need. Don't forget to tune in this Friday. We're going to have our special live stream and we have some surprises for you. So if you made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you very much. Thank you for the support and I'll see you back very soon. Don't forget, always learning, always improving.